This is the Mooncast.
See you, Space Cowboy.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about Ray Dalio's interview with Tucker Carlson. And it recently went viral. And if you guys don't know who Ray Dalio is, he made a book about the New World Order, basically talking and alluding to the declining US empire and how that China was going to be the ones to basically take over the New World Order and structuring. Now, I'll get to more about China after we just go through all of this and just tell you a little bit of my viewpoint on it from me just traveling around the world, being a global traveler and observer of how these shifts are happening in real time. So, Ray Dalio, I wrote here, Ray Dalio's interview with Tucker Carlson just went viral, and he's not just talking about market predictions. Instead, he exposed a truth or a dark truth most Americans don't want to admit. Here are his 7 shocking claims about America's new civil war. For 2 hours, Tucker sat stunned as Dalio methodology, or how he broke down the forces tearing America apart, right? So not with opinions or politics, but with cold hard data that proves we're already in a civil war, right? So here's what he revealed, right? So first things first. So the first thing that he revealed was America's new civil war. We're already in it, but not with guns yet. Dalio warns there are irreconcilable differences that each side is willing to fight for, right? The polarization is the worst since 1900, with the lowest cross-party cooperation in history, and it's only going to get worse. The problem with the way that America was built, there's a lot of issues in how America was built, but one of the issues that they never really reconciled with was the racial tensions, and that's due to the fact of them not acknowledging their true history and teaching false history, or teaching a watered down version of history, so that they could make it appear that the way America was built was not mainly contributed by the efforts and the free labor, forced labor of enslaved Africans, right? And that's something that has been a dark cloud that's been over America for a long period of time now. And these things are just now start coming to light as people start to look for the information in this current age of information, where people are starting to realize true history and what exactly happened, the significance with Africans and all the inventions that they built, all the free labor that they gave, and how they were significant contributors to World War I and II. All of these things are now starting to come to light, and there's a huge divide. People want their reparations, which is something that is owed and due to them. And if you look throughout history, Japan received reparations. Native Americans received reparations. The Jews received reparations, but Africans globally haven't received reparations. In fact, if you look and trail back to Africa, you have still former, or air quotations, so-called former colonial countries in Africa still paying post-colonial reparations tax to Western countries, right? Like if you look at the Francophone countries, they're still paying upwards of 50% of their GDP to France, right? So there's a lot of things that is now starting to come to light, that people are starting to realize that none of the stuff that they said was true. Nothing has really changed. And if anything, it's just still business as usual with the military industrial complex and so on, which is extremely profitable too as well. And this is one thing that I try to explain to people with how it works. So I'll give you a simple example, like with Ukraine. So Ukraine gets sent aid in dollars. Some of it is in weapons from America. The rest is in dollars. They buy military weaponry from companies like Lockheed Martin and so on, and those companies get richer, and the shareholders and the main stakeholders of those companies are the politicians themselves, and this just gets circular in this sort of Ponzi scheme, right? And they do this all throughout the world. There's now people are starting to come out and they're realizing that they were funding the Taliban. I was a former United States Army war veteran, and when I was in Afghanistan, I saw a bunch of things to confirm those truths, those hard truths. And the reality is, old grown men are sending young kids to go fight their wars and to extract natural resources, right? And exploit other people's lands. That's what's happening. And it's quite terrible to come to that reality, but that is basically one of the main industries that America does really well, is war, right? So the main two exports are inflation and war. And that's just the reality of the situation. So moving on to the second thing that Ray Dalio pointed out, and that was the 60% crisis. So a shocking statistic that explains everything. 60% of Americans have below a sixth grade reading level. Only 3 million people out of 330 million plus are driving all technological innovation. This education gap is creating an unprecedented wealth divide. This is absolutely true. When anecdotally speaking, when I go back to the States, I haven't lived in the States in 12 years or so, right? I left a very long time ago. And every time I go back to go visit, I notice that the people are deteriorating in intellect and critical thinking capabilities. And this is not just an American problem, it's a global issue where people think that they know stuff because they were indoctrinated through a school system that fed them lies and propaganda and programmed them to believe something that isn't inherently true. If you look down to just simple things like, you go to school, you get a job, and then you work for somebody for a certain amount of time until you're 60, trading your life force away for fake dollars, and then you're supposed to then retire and live a happily ever life, and that's just not the reality of the situation. The reality is that a lot of jobs are getting eradicated because of AI. Even me and my company, we use AI softwares to streamline processes for us, from anywhere ranging from contracts to content creation and strategic planning, right? So a lot of those jobs are going to just be gone, right? They're not going to need to exist anymore. And a lot of people are not aware of this exponential growth phase of technological advancements. China is farther ahead in every single aspect, ranging from robotics to artificial intelligence to blockchain technology to virtual reality, augmented reality, and so on. China is way farther ahead, even quantum computing. So in this, we're in a tech race, and it's sort of like a tech war, if you will. There's multiple different wars happening simultaneously. There's the tech wars, there's physical wars for natural resources, there's spiritual wars, and there's a finance war between crypto, blockchain technology, and versus the current financial infrastructure. So all those are happening simultaneously at the same time, and we'll see who the winners are. But I do believe there's going to be way more chaos before there is peace, as the global power structures are actually changing in real time. And I think we're going to go into more of a multipolar, technocentric future. That has been my thesis for the past few years now. The more that I dive into tech, the more that I build products, the more that I stay up to date on the latest and greatest within the macroeconomic and geopolitical landscape. It appears that this is where we're going and heading towards. So we need to be very diligent and very perspicacious in understanding the times that we're in, and we need to adjust our strategies based off of those times. And I think that's one of the hard things for a lot of people, is the fact that they don't understand that you have to be adaptable in this era that we're in. You can no longer think about this fugazi sort of streamlined lifestyle that was basically pre-planned for you, because that no longer is going to exist. You need to be flexible, adaptable. It's not going to be the strongest, it's not going to be the smartest, it's going to be the most adaptable. And that's something that I'm very good at. And I'll probably talk about this more later on during the podcast, just about different ways and strategies you can deploy during this time, and what you can do to position yourself so that you don't get wrecked. Especially if you're a single person, you definitely can take all the risk in the world to make sure that you try to position yourself, at least, because my estimates is we have about 5 years left until you can't position yourself anymore. It'll be way too difficult based off of the geopolitical landscape, the fiat money printing that's happening from the data that I'm recollecting, and being able to process what is exactly going on and predict an appropriate time frame based off of those data and analytics from the financial system, because all of these Western countries are now broke, and we're just now entering the beginning stages of hyperinflation. So it's only going to get worse from here. So when you look at the third point that he made, so the AI time warp. So again, we're going through a time warp in the next 5 years. So you see, again, he's predicting the same thing that I've been talking about on my podcast for a few years now, is by 2030, that will be it. I don't think that if you're not positioned, if you don't have a tech company, if you don't have, again, these are things that maybe I can just talk about now, but these are, I think, some ways you can position yourself is to invest into the technology as it's rapidly growing, is to also build products for those specific industry niches that are going to be relevant in the next 5 years. And again, that's robotics, metaverse, augmented reality, virtual reality, blockchain technology. So if you're in these sort of spaces, quantum computing and so on, and if you're investing or building products around these ecosystems, I think you're going to do just fine. And if also, I think now is not the time to be playing offense only, which is cash flow. You need to be playing defense, and defense is having a sustainable model for yourself in case everything just crashes, including fiat, and people don't know what to trade with for a short duration of time. At least you have a fallback plan. You have, let's say, you've built a sustainable home, you have solar panels, you have a borehole, you can grow your own food, and that would be able to sustain you. Also, maybe you have a little pond for fish, or poultry, or whatever it is that you want for protein, right? And that would be enough to sustain you during these tough times, right? So you should be thinking about that strategy, and thinking outside of the box of not just profit, but how to survive, right? Because if you don't have those backup plans in place, it's going to be very difficult in the event that something like that were to occur, or you were to lose your job quickly, right? Because Ray Dalio, again, he talks about it, moving on to what I wrote here. It says current AI systems already match PhD level knowledge across all fields, right? Again, current AI systems already match PhD level knowledge across all fields. So this capabilities compounds daily, revolutionizing economic policy, military strategy, social systems, healthcare, and so on and so forth, right? So what does this mean for you if the AI is already at PhD levels now, and just, the ChatGPT was released in, I think, Q4 2022. So you're talking about roughly about a little bit over 2 years, right? Two and a half years, or a little bit less than that, right? That ChatGPT has been out, and look how fast and rapid it's grown in that short amount of time. How do you think it's going to grow within the next 5 years from now? I believe we're already in AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, and eventually will reach a point where I think the intelligence gets into this singularity sort of format, right? So eventually we're going to get to a stage where the AI will not just coincide or synergize with your workplace practices to optimize what you do, but I think you'll eventually be able to replace you. If you look at Y Combinator, they're a very prominent VC startup fund, right? And they deal with more incubation and acceleration. And they recently just put out a request for the next stage of AI founders to be people who are able to build products that replace humans and not just synergize to optimize workplace processes. So that tells you what they're thinking about and where things are going to be headed. And as you know, especially in the West, they want to really accelerate the robotics and artificial intelligence space because they do want to replace humans with these robots and AI. Why? Because, well, their population is decreasing at a rapid pace. And I don't see that slowing down anytime soon as inflation continues to increase. So it makes it less affordable for you to be able to have a family. And because of that, you're going to then not have enough people in the workforce to pay for taxes. So although they like to believe that they can have a homogenous society, it's not stable to do that, right? It's not possible to do that. So they either have to bring in immigrants, which, as you know, a lot of people in the West are racist, right? So they don't like that, or they need to replace the workforce with robots, right? So those are basically the two options that they have. And either one of those are something that they would like, right? They don't like the immigrants because they're racist and they want to be in more of a homogenous society, but then they're not populating enough. So they're facing those issues. So, which is a lot different sort of predicament for like if you're talking about Africa, because Africa can just build their own systems and not have to deal with what the outside world is doing. So where that's the strategic advantage that Africa has in the global landscape because they have all the resources. Once they get those taken back, as the West continues to weaken and imperialism continues to weaken, and they have the resources back in their control, they then have the leverage back, which gives them power, and so that they're no longer at the bottom of this globalized sort of racial caste system fueled by capitalism, which only works if you're able to exploit the cheap labor or the cheap natural resources, right? And the only way you're able to do that is, or that they think they can do that, when I say they, I'm talking about the West, is through exploitation of others through destabilization, dividing and conquering, and capitalizing. So that's kind of how that works in a nutshell. And the fourth thing that Dalio talks about here is the China reality check, right? So Dalio drops a bomb. The US will never catch up to China in manufacturing in our lifetimes. Again, the US will never catch up to China in manufacturing in our lifetimes. China controls 33% of global manufacturing, more than the US, Europe, and Japan combined. Again, that's more than the US, Europe, and Japan combined. They're dominating in robotics, chip production, and AI application, and so on and so forth. And this is very evident. Like I said, if you've traveled and your eyeballs are open, you can see China's not just dominating in innovation and also global manufacturing, but they're also dominating in when it comes to investments in other countries. They're everywhere. They own a lot of the buildings, infrastructures now. They have Chinatowns almost in every single country, anywhere ranging from Europe to Africa. Even in the States, they own a couple of the mines. And they own about 20% of the US debt, so they could dump that at any point in time to trigger more hyperinflation. So it's pretty much done. It's just that, they don't want to concede. So they're going to do everything in their power to try to slow China down, but it's too late. They're too far gone, and they've surpassed the rest of the world. And that's just the reality of the situation. And moving on to the fifth point, the innovation paradox, right? So the US's last advantage, right, is innovation in universities. But here's the twist: half of our top innovators are foreigners who came to our universities. And with AI reaching PhD level knowledge, even this edge is at risk. And this is absolutely true. A lot of the, if you look even at the top net worth people with the highest net worth in the US, I believe I know it's India at one. I think Chinese people are at two. And I know three is Nigerians, right? So Europeans aren't even in their top three in terms of net worth in the United States currently today. And everyone knows that, they have to play these unfair advantages with military power and military might, because they don't have what it takes to compete in an equitable, fair and free market, not just the United States, but just the West in general. They just don't have they don't have the capability to do that, right? So they have to neo-colonize, they have to military and industrialize, they have to export inflation and control the monetary systems. They have to, if you look at the US today, it's a capitalized market. What do they really produce? I mean, yeah, you could say technology, but
imagine 10xing your earnings capacity to 100K per year while working remotely at the comfort of your own home. We are in the exponential growth phase of technological advancements. That means AI, AR, VR, robotics, and of course, Web3 technologies taking over the job market. At HeliCode Academy, we train students on Web3 hard skills and link them to employment in the job market. Find out more at helicode.xyz. And as always, see you, Space Cowboy.
they don't produce much, right? They're a consumer-based economy now, right? And that's just the reality of the situation. When you look at the universities need to be implementing quickly these new techs. This is why I built the EdTech platform. But my regional focus is on Africa. But the idea remains the same, that we need new ways of learning and new ways to implement these things and make them more streamlined, and to keep up with the innovative tech that's happening. There's new tech launching every single month, right? Universities aren't keeping up with that because they have a set standard curriculum that you must then go through for 4 years to be able to then achieve a certain baseline level of understanding. And then you do another 2 years to receive another baseline level of understanding. You do another 2 years with your PhD to receive the last tier of level of understanding, which you will call mastery in terms of the theses. But when it comes to practicality, a lot of universities are lacking. They're lacking innovative and intuitive ways to learn. So a lot of it is scripted, and by the time you finish those 4 years of learning in the first 4 years, the technology's already moved way faster, way beyond. So you're always going to be behind using that methodology. So the better methodology is kind of what we present at HeliCode, which is a edtech platform that creates a learning environment that's fast-paced, practical, live courses, and very interactive, and you learn very quickly, and you're able to apply very quickly and analyze quickly, right? And this is I'm training my students for the current landscape of today's society, right? Whereas the university is still stuck in the primitive past and hasn't evolved. So I decided to take matters into my own hand to build something that would be more conducive for today's climate and environment, and makes more sense in terms of the practicality of today. So that's the issue with universities today. Most of them are behind. I'll tell you that firsthand. Just seeing and being able to be a mentor at the Stanford AI and Web3 research labs, it's not what you think it is. That's what I would say. It's not what you think it is. So I don't know if the US would be able to use those two so-called unfair or last advantages to their benefit, seeing as majority of those thriving students are foreigners in the first place, and a lot of the innovation is getting done through foreigners. Secondly, and if you look at number 6. So the point, moving on to number 6 of what Ray Dalio was talking about. So the social control dilemma. So AI will lead to one of the two scenarios, right? Complete totalitarian control or total anarchy. There is no middle ground, and the scariest part, no one in control of this transition. It's very, very polarizing and very extreme on both ends. Do I believe that's what's going to happen with AI? Possibly. When you have these open source technologies now, there's no way to really, again, it's try to do this with Bitcoin, try to shut it down. There's no way to shut down open source technology and or decentralized technology. It's very difficult to really track these things. I'm on the fence of total anarchy and a reconstructing of societies. I think we're way overdue with that, not building these eco-friendly environments that we should already be able to have, but due to people's profit first mindset, we're not able to get to that point. So that's very unfortunate, because we have all of the technology and know-how and information to be able to facilitate structures like this, but and create circular economies, create more sustainable environments for everybody, but we're just choosing not to. And people are getting fed up. People are realizing that they're a slave in a 9 to 5 matrix, and more people are quitting. More people are looking for other alternatives to live. More people are just tapping out of the matrix in the system completely. Some people are living even basically without any money, and they're just living sustainable lives out in the woods or in nature, outside of the city ecosystem, which is designed, that's why it's called a capital city, because designed for shitty people to go into those cities and to capitalize on others and exploit others, right? That's the only way capitalism works. And so those cities then get inflated, people start complaining, but continue on the journey of being in that hamster wheel rat race and staying in those cities instead of looking for alternatives until it's too late. And then in the States, it's a very unique situation because they have guns. And because they have guns, there could be a potential possibility of a very bloody civil war. I don't want that to happen. I don't wish that to happen, but it may be the fate of the United States where it destroys itself from within. And that will be their reality. So there is no middle ground. And moving on to point number 7, the community solution. Power and wealth have zero correlation with happiness beyond basic needs. The highest detriment of happiness is community. Countries with strong communities consistently show higher happiness regards to GDP. I'll tell you that firsthand. I'm here in Ghana now, and you can see people are way more happy than they are in other areas around the world. People smile more, they have good time more, and it's just a completely different environment than what I've been used to of seeing in other places in the West, where people just look miserable. One of my buddies just went on a cruise that stopped in 3 different locations between Belgium, Netherlands, and Germany. And he was telling me how depressed everyone looks and how it's not how he imagined it to be. He was expecting, because those countries are quote unquote richer, depends on how you value riches or wealth, that he thought that would correlate with more happiness, but it seemed more doom and gloom in those locations, which I'm not shocked about at all. And again, community is very important. This is why I am building out a community, teaching people on how to build this digital infrastructure to keep up with the technological times that we're in currently right now. I really understand the importance of community. This is why I'm in Africa, really enjoy it. And I think that Web3 technology, blockchain technology also has a lot of these ethos of community, which I think also we're transitioning into digital network states where people who will hold the most power are going to be the ones that are able to build huge digital network states that are able to leverage them to fund projects and things that they want done. If you look at Mr. Beast, I think he has a combined audience of about 450 to 500 million on YouTube. So he's then able to then he could literally sell anything, and he could literally make a lot of change through fundraising and etc. So he may even have more power, in my opinion, than a lot of these countries themselves, right? And he's a digital network state. So this is, I think, where we're transitioning to, but the decentralized version of that is not yet quite refined and fine-tuned, but it will be soon. And when it is, it's going to be able to make things more efficient. And I think those are the people that are going to have the power the most, are the ones with the communities built that can't be destroyed because they're digital and are location agnostic, so they can literally move anywhere that they want to because it's all in cyberspace. So when people have strong social connections, everything improves. So that was Ray Dalio's main and final point, right? Which is obvious. Right? We've gotten away from that, especially in the West. Everything's about profit. And then they've exported that influence through their soft power to the rest of the globe for people to more or less think that way. And when in reality, the money itself is fake. So you're just chasing an illusion of something that was built not for you, where other people have the privilege to get and print more units whenever they feel like it, where you have to work for those units. And the more that they print, the more of it more units you have to go and get, and the more of your time, labor is being traded for that. So it's not a sustainable model at all. And that's just what Ray Dalio speaks about throughout this Tucker Carlson interview. And moving on to the capital flight from the west to east and the south, right? So just want to bring up some empirical data, facts between 2022 and 2023. This is what I was able to draw up quickly. I'm sure things are moving a lot quicker than since that time frame, because now we're in 2025, as you know. So when you talk about net outflows of high net worth individuals in 2022 in the United Kingdom, you had 1,400 people leave, right? And this is like people 1 million net worth and above. Reasons are Brexit, economic uncertainty, and high taxes. Who would have thought? And some of the main destinations that these countries are going, or these people are going to, are countries like the UAE, which has been a popular location for high net worth individuals, Singapore, and Australia. Not too sure why people are going to Australia. Especially if you saw what happened during the so-called sickness in 2020, I would assume that that would not be a location that would be suitable, but maybe it is. I mean, anywhere is really suitable for you if you do make or have a super high net worth. You can make anything work, because money can you can tailor your solution based off of deploying capital to tailor a lifestyle that suits you in almost anywhere. But what I would say though is that they seem or appear to be attacking people of higher net worth. It appears that they don't want you to make a lot of money. It appears that they want to, it's by design to have a lot of this red tape so you can't compete and get into the market and steal market share from others. So it's not a free market, right? It's more socialism for the elites and capitalism for the plebs. It's what it appears to be like, you know. This is just my thesis based off of me just looking with my eyeballs and seeing how the landscape is. When you look at the United States, you have a net outflow of high net worth individuals, or NHWIs, in 2022 of 1,500, right? Reasons: political polarization, high taxes, and crime rates in the US, right? And crime rates, and the places people are going from the US to for these high net worth individuals is Portugal, UAE again, and Singapore. Yeah, I've heard Portugal has been one of those places where a lot of the US expats are. It's just not a bad location, you know, depends on what you're looking for out of your life. I would highly recommend for people to not be anywhere in the West. In particular, I believe the South and East are much better destinations. But Portugal appears to be one of those outliers from the research that I've done and from the anecdotal data that I've seen. So China also has net outflows of 10,800 millionaires. Reasons: economic slowdown, strict COVID-19 policies, and geopolitical tensions. So a lot of millionaires are also fleeing from China. I know some of them are going to like Cyprus and very unique locations. I think Turkey too as well. Yeah, the Chinese are everywhere. So they're also here in Africa as well. Then you also have the areas, but it says here that some of the areas that they are going to, based off this research, it says that it's Singapore, they're actually going to the US, and they're going to Canada. Interesting. And 8,500 high net worth individuals leaving Russia in terms of outflows. And that is due to, again, geopolitical tensions, sanctions, and economic instability. The destinations, again, are Dubai or UAE, Israel, which I'm sure that when you update this list, it won't be Israel due to the fact that they are in a war. So I think that that is probably different. This is, again, as of 2022, so it's 2025 now. So this list is probably a little bit different. This is what it says for 2022 in Turkey, right? India, it's about 7,500 people in terms of outflows. And again, Singapore and UAE seem to be like a common denominator there. And again, they say it's high taxes, bureaucratic hurdles, and better opportunities abroad is the reasons why. And here's a regional breakdown of the inflows of millionaires coming in as of 2022. Again, a regional breakdown of the inflows coming in regionally as of 2022. So you have here the UAE of net inflows of 4,500 millionaires. I'm sure that number is increasing rapidly. You have 300 net inflows in Saudi Arabia. Qatar, you have 200 net inflows. Southeast Asia, you have 2,800 net inflows in Singapore, 200 in Malaysia, 100 in Thailand. Europe is getting inflows from Greece, 500, Switzerland, which is maybe another one of these outliers, and Portugal is another maybe European outlier with 1,300 inflows. Then, of course, you have the Caribbean, St. Kitts and Nevis, 100 net inflows, and Antigua and Barbuda, 50 net inflows. And Africa is now coming into place, right? You have South Africa at 800 net outflows. Okay, and then you have Mauritius at 100 net inflows and Rwanda at 50 net inflows. So Rwanda, again, is another one of those sleepers that people aren't aware of. It's one of the faster growing economies worldwide. Infrastructure is on point, one of the cleanest countries in the world, right? People really sleep on those things. And yeah, so one other thing I wanted to discuss about is the Donald Trump tariffs, right, for 2025. This is what he's proposed. So I'm just going to read what this says here. So Donald Trump has proposed new tariffs for 2025 as part of the economic agenda if he wins. Okay, so he already won the presidential candidacy, right? So here's some of the stuff that he's looking to propose, right? And stuff that he's doing, like with the tariffs. So he signed a couple executive orders, and some of them is to, okay, so he wants to, I know he wants to increase the tariffs by 60%, right, for Chinese imports, which is terrible, right? And part of the reason that he's trying to increase these tariffs is to reduce U.S. trade deficit, bring manufacturing jobs back, and protect domestic industries. The issue that I have with this is the fact that U.S. manufacturing is too expensive because you have to pay workers too much high wages, right? This is why they exported it out to East, right? And that was strategic why they did it out East and not to Africa. Because if they would have did it in Africa, well, Africa is the backbone of Western economies, right? They need to exploit Africa. So if Africa starts manufacturing their own resources, it's very bad, right? So they export that technology to China. China took it, ran with it, and now China is, I think, owning about, like I said, we talked about it earlier, about 33% or so of entire global manufacturing. and they're crushing it. So the issue is that it's too expensive. So you have to export it out for cheaper labor. That's how capitalism works. It's through exploitation of cheap labor and cheap natural resources. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Now, when you impose these tariffs, it's supposed to be a universal 10% tariff, right? And when you impose these tariffs, you have issues of the repercussions of that, right? So when you think that you're not, so when you increase the amount of tariffs that you're imposing on imports, the importers just add that cost to the end consumer. So in the end, the end consumer loses, and it's just going to create more inflation. And as he's doing this, if inflation continues to increase, they're probably going to have to switch back into QT, or at least pause the interest rates. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen on March 18th. Another thing I didn't tell you guys too as well is I did take profits from the crypto market. For me, I was in a different position. Me and my clients, we had gotten in a lot earlier, especially me particularly. I bought into the market when Bitcoin was at 17K. So for me, I don't want to take on more risk. I wanted to focus on other things. I wanted to focus on the sustainable home that is almost finished that I'm building. I wanted to focus on my edtech platform, and I wanted to focus on this podcast, right? I didn't want to focus on the markets anymore. So everyone's situation is different. Now, do I think that we could enter into a super cycle? Perhaps. We could enter into a crypto super cycle. It's possible. It all depends on these interest rates, right? If they lower them, it's going to be interesting, because if they lower the interest rates and the tariffs are also happening simultaneously, it's going to create a huge amount of inflation. A huge amount of inflation, from prices to assets, all simultaneously are going to bubble. So that's the thing with these tariffs. I understand the protectionism type of policies that he's trying to put into place, but it's not going to work because it's just too expensive to manufacture and then use domestic products in the States, because it's all a business at the end of the day. So if you have to pay more for labor costs, and also you're kicking out the immigrants, there was a lot of cheap labor that you were getting from those illegals and non-illegals, right? So because you're kicking them out, who's going to do those jobs for cheap, and who wants to do those jobs, right? And especially in America, where people think they're too good for those type of jobs. Those are for dumb people, farming and manufacturing and so on, right? And that's just the psychological hurdle that you face. So it's very interesting to see how this is going to play out. But with the markets, going back to that specifically, it's very important to look at things from your lens. And when you got in the market, if you are in profit, what risk are you willing to take on? If you're okay losing everything you have in the markets now, or having that getting reduced by 50 to 90%, perhaps, then that's okay. That's fine. Leave what you have in the market. But for me, I was up 600% of my portfolio, and I had clients up anywhere from 200 to 400 to 500% on their portfolio in a few years. So it didn't make sense for me to take on more risk when I could take the profits, fulfill my obligation to my clients, and take my commission, right? And so you as an individual have to decide for yourself what's best and most suitable for you, and use the data analytics and the empirical evidence from the global landscape, the geopolitical and macroeconomic landscape, to be able to determine your investment thesis moving forward. For me, I actually think that everything will depend on what they do on March 18th, when the Fed meeting for interest rates, either lowering or increasing interest rates, or pausing the interest rates, right? I think the more probable thing is either they pause or they lower the interest rates again, right? They've paused on December. So these tariffs kind of a little bit threw everybody off, because that's just going to create more inflation, as I previously stated how that works, right? So it's very interesting. And it's also there's a potential possibility again for counter tariff policies, right, from other countries that the U.S. is imposing tariffs on, right? So it's just a really messed up situation where it's just going to cause more inflation globally, right? From all of this, right? So you talk about EU, China, and etc. So again, I'm very, very curious to see how this plays out, how this works, and what's going to happen. But you do need to be mindful, if you are in profits, that it's okay to take profits off the table, or at least take your initials out. The market could explode. Like I said, I'm not sure, but I didn't want to get too greedy. So for me, I decided to get out of the market now. I'm more better at timing bottoms of markets than tops. Tops is extremely hard. And some people have different strategies. Some people are just taking 20% as they go along as the market is rising, while other people like to maybe go and take everything out at one time when they feel comfortable after they've held for a long period of time. It depends. It depends on what you're trying to do. So that's my take on that. And like I said, I do hope that you guys did enjoy this podcast, and I hope you guys will stay with me for the next one, and we'll have more and more content like this coming up, as I will be getting back to eventually doing more guest podcasts. Right now, I'm a little bit in transit as I'm moving to my new place that I'm building very shortly. So because of that, I've been doing more individual podcasts. I've been running around like crazy. I have so much things that I'm working on, the farm and etc. and all these things. So we'll get back to, again, the guest podcast soon. And I do hope that you guys are enjoying these. We've been running for 2 years now. Thank you so much for your support. And stay tuned for the next one. And peace.